It's good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy. Back with I'm talking about it. Back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I bring version 1.0 deck list of the commander in front of us on my quest to brew the magic world. You know the motto, baby. It's ABB, always be brewing. That's what we're back to do today. The deck list is going to be down in the description for you below, as well as I'd really appreciate it if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, consider checking out those links in the description. I'd appreciate it. But today, we're continuing through Precon Week for Final Fantasy, and today we're talking about Tidus, Yuna's Guardian, a 3-mana Bant 3/3 human warrior that says beginning a combat on our turn, we can move a counter from a creature we control to another creature we control. And whenever one or more of our creatures with counters on them deal damage to a player, we can draw a card and proliferate. We can only do that once per turn, so one proliferate per turn. Tidus is a very interesting counters commander in a lot of ways. One, because it allows you to move counters from one creature to another, which is actually very interesting and is going to be really helpful depending on the kind of the roster of creatures you choose and how you choose to care about the counters. But the second is he makes proliferating really easy. There are a lot of things that care about proliferating or things that proliferate can make great for us, but when it's stapled onto your commander, it's something that's fairly easy to do in our colors in combat. I think Tidus just makes it a lot easier to do. We're going to focus on counters and all things counters. We can mess around a little bit with poison counters, whether it be toxic or just giving our opponents poison counters, because we get to proliferate them each turn. It's not the main focus of our deck, but it's something we could try to mess around with a little bit. And then we'll talk about the combo that's included in the precon that we're going to happily include in our deck as well. Thank you so much to the channel members for supporting the channel. I really appreciate it. If you're interested in seeing all of the videos a little bit earlier on the channel, check it out in the link down below. But okay, how do we get counters onto our creatures? Well, there's a lot of ways to do this. What we're going to try to do is amass some of these effects, especially if they can give them out to all of our creatures. I think a great example is Mikaeus the Lunarch. It's an X and a white human that comes in with X counters on it. We could tap to put a counter on it, or tap to remove a counter to put a counter on all of our other creatures. This is important because basically, if you have nothing better to do, Tidus could just take a counter and put it back on Mikaeus so that Mikaeus could tap to put the counter on everything else, right? Making sure that we're spreading these counters out. Vorinclex is going to take any number of counters we put on a permanent or player and put twice that many on instead. And if our opponents would do it, they do half that many rounded down. This is important for two reasons. One, any counter we put on, we definitely want double of. Going to make everything better overall for us. And having it for our opponents is actually going to hurt them a ton. If you've never played counters into a Vorinclex, you don't understand how tough it can be. And Vorinclex is such a great piece to have on our side. Zamon hands out 2 counters at the start of combat, and then can pay double the amount of counters on creatures or up to 2 creatures or effects we control. It's a very interesting ability. And I think the nice thing about Zamon is that you're handing 2 of these out every turn, meaning it's just going to get better and better for us. Yuna's Whistle lets us look at the cards at the top till we hit a creature card and put it into our hand and put counters on a creature we control where X is the mana value of that card. Just an interesting way to potentially get a stack of counters on a creature at the right time. Andoril and Broker's Ascendancy are both ways we can get counters on all of our creatures. The Ascendancy just does the beginning of our end step, putting a counter on each creature we control, whereas Andoril does it whenever the creature it's equipped to attacks. But if we have the City's Blessing, we put 2 counters on each creature instead, just making sure that you're really spreading those counters around and we're getting them on everything. Sphere Gred says whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to an opponent, we get to put a counter on that creature. And then all of our creatures with counters on them have reach and trample. This is a really great card, making sure that the creatures that we have that maybe don't have a counter on them already, but have some sort of evasion or can really hit hard, are going to get in and get a counter on them. That way they can continue to have access to all of these great abilities we have that care about counters. And then Virtual Loyalty says at the beginning of our end step, we get to put a counter on each creature we control and untap them. So they basically get Vigilance, but they also just untap. This is also really nice if you have any creatures that have any ways to tap for mana or anything like that. They're going to get to untap and be able to use them. But we have a ton of ways to care about our creatures having counters on them. Both Absent Battle Priest and Falconer give out some abilities for all of our creatures with counters on them, being Lifelink and Flying, respectively. Both great abilities and are going to help us right over the course of a game do more for our opponents. One of them getting us some life back, the other giving us some evasion. Bulwark Ox can hand out a counter whenever it attacks while saddled, but the key thing we care about is its second ability, that we can sacrifice it to give all of our creatures with counters on them hexproof and indestructible. This is just great because the Ox will help pass out some counters, but when it's time, it can just sacrifice to protect our board. Chocobo Knights give all of our creatures with counters on them double strike whenever you attack. The nice part is the Knights don't have to attack. It's just a whenever you attack trigger, which is really useful because I think it's going to allow Chocobo just to do more damage overall, right? Because the difference between whenever you attack and whenever Chocobo Knights attacks is a huge chasm of difference. Most of the time, a turn, right? That turn could mean a lot on the double strike damage, especially when you pair it with something like Flying or Trample, right? Danny Pink gives all of our creatures that whenever one or more counters are put on one of our creatures for the first time each turn, we draw a card. This triggers for every creature we control, hopefully just drawing us a ton of cards. Herald gives all of our creatures with counters on them unblockability, just make sure we can really connect for that damage and hit our opponents hard. Riku says whenever we put one or more counters on a creature until end of turn, that creature can't be blocked by creatures our opponents control. Just a very interesting ability. She also has the ability, or they also have the ability to move a counter from one creature to another if we need to. Damning Verdict destroys all creatures with no counters on them. Again, we're hoping our whole board has counters on them so we can really take advantage of Damning Verdict, destroying all our opponents' creatures. Same thing with Wave Goodbye. Returning each creature without a counter on it to its owner's hand. Again, just really hoping we can take advantage of that to have our board be safe and intact. Inspiring Call gives all creatures with counters on them indestructible, and then we can draw a card for each creature with a counter on it. And then we're playing an interesting pair of protection spells for us. Mutational Advantage lets us give permanents we control with counters on them hexproof and indestructible, prevent all damage to be dealt to them, and then Proliferate, very interesting. And then Ripples of Potential gives them proliferates, then gives any number of permanents that had a counter put on this way the ability to phase out. Both of these just really interesting protection spells. Mutational Advantage is going to give that classic just board wipe protection style ability with proliferate, whereas Ripple Potentials is just going to completely phase them out, helping them get around things like Farewell or Exile removal to protect them even more. Astral Cornucopia and Everflowing Chalice that come in the precon are both really interesting artifacts, especially when Tidus is looking to proliferate every turn. So Astral Cornucopia comes with X charge counters on it. Most of the time it's going to come in as 1, so it's going to tap for 1 mana. But as Tidus proliferates, right, you're putting more counters on it, meaning it's tapping for more and more every turn. Innkeeper's Talent hands out that counter at the start of each combat, and you can level it up to give your creatures or your permanents with counters on them a little bit of protection. And then that Branching Evolution Doubling Season style ability on level 3 to just double the amount of counters to be put on something. And then since we're going to have so many counters going on, it seems wrong to not play Simic Ascendancy. Whenever one or more counters are put on a creature we control, we put that many growth counters on it. And at the start of our turn, if we have 20 more growth counters on Simic Ascendancy, we win the game. And then for 3 mana, we can also put out a counter if we need to. Simic Ascendancy is just one of those key pieces that's going to be win more for us. We're not always going to win with it when we see it, but it's nice to have it as an option for us as we work our game plan. We're not playing a ton into the poison, but I think the poison is very viable. We have things like Bloated Contaminator that have a toxic ability, meaning whenever they hit a player, they get a poison counter, and then it proliferates when it hits. So as long as we can get a poison counter onto each opponent, we can start proliferate them, make them worse. But you also have things like Infectious Bite and Prologue to Freezes that just give each opponent a poison counter, and now you can start proliferating right and really taking advantage of them having them, because remember, we just need to get 10 on any one opponent for them to get knocked out. And that's where I think Proliferate's going to come into real handy, obviously for the counters, right? We have so many creatures that are going to have counters on them. Proliferate adding more counters is huge, but it's also huge if you want to really run down that poison game plan. But there's a lot of ways to approach proliferating. We have things like Grateful Apparition that get to proliferate whenever it hits a player in combat. Lulu Stern Guardian can pay 4 mana to proliferate, which is kind of interesting. Techathologist basically says if we would proliferate, we proliferate twice instead. A really awesome ability to increase the value of our things. Trumall can pay 1 and tap to proliferate X time, where X is the number of non-token creatures we had come in this turn. Recurrent Craft Theta is an interesting vehicle that proliferates on attack and become a nice threat that way. And then Staff of Completion, we can just pay 3 light to proliferate. We also have options to add mana and draw cards, but it's nice to have the option to proliferate if we need to, because you never know when one proliferate could be the difference between a big turn hitting our opponents for big damage, or not having enough to close out a scenario. But I do want to mention the combo that is in the pre-con and we're going to keep in our deck. We're not playing a ton of ways to look for it, but I think if we could see all of them at the same time, this could be a really fun combo for it. So it starts with hardened scales. Whenever you'd put one or more counters on a creature we control, we put that many +1 counters instead. The next part of the combo normally requires you get the Ballista out with at least 2 counters on it. You can get more if you want to. But then you play Gata and Luzu. It says when it enters, you choose target creature you control. If damage would be dealt to that creature, prevent that damage and put that many counters on it. So what you're going to do is have Walking Ballista remove a counter from itself to try to deal a damage to itself. Luzu's going to see that, preventing it, and put the counter back on it. Then Hardened Scales is going to end up giving it 2 counters, meaning you're up a counter. What this is then going to do is allow you to basically go up a counter every time it targets itself. And basically what you can do is just amass enough +1/+1 counters on Ballista so that you can then start removing the counters to deal damage to your opponents, just machine gunning them out of the game. Ballista has a bunch of combos with a couple other creatures. You could throw Heliod, Suncrowned in here as another combination for Ballista if you want to. But what I think is interesting about this combo is technically you can do this as early as turn 3. Technically, if you go Hardened Scales into Ballista into Gata, you could put this out on turn 3. It would require a really great hand, but I think it's just an interesting combo amidst all the other pieces we have. But I've said it before on the show and I'll say it again, no deck's ever complete. This is our version 1.0 shot at Tidus. And I think going into testing, there's some things we want to see. One, do we need more proliferate? Something like Dreamtide Whale just feels like a great card for this deck. I just couldn't find a slot for it. I feel like it's going to allow us to proliferate pretty often, including on our opponent's turns. Season of Gathering is a card I really like. It's got some nice utility. We can do the top mode 5 times, just putting counters and creatures and giving them Vigilance and Trample, which is a great ability, especially the bigger our creatures get. But I think the other palm modes are really interesting. Choosing Artifact or Enchantment and just destroying all permanents of that type could be really hurtful for our opponents. Drawing cards equal to the greatest power among creatures we control just could draw us a ton of cards if we need it. I like the Gathering. I just honestly couldn't find a slot for it. That's the problem I really ran into in this deck. I got it down to like 105 and had a really tough time cutting cards because I just think there were so many great options. And then Protection Magic, one of the new cards in the precon, to put a shield counter on each up to 3 creatures. Remember, shield counters say if a creature with a shield counter would be dealt damage or destroyed, you remove it. Again, nice because then you can start proliferating shield counters on to our creatures. And then remember that Tidus' ability says it doesn't say move a +1/+1 counter, it just says move a counter, meaning you could move the shield counter onto another creature if you had more than one, right, to make sure that you proliferate them all. There's a lot of ways you could take this. You could spin more into the poison counters if you want to. You could spin more into +1/+1 counters. You could care more about proliferating. There's so many ways we could take the deck, and that was really what we're looking for as we go into testing. But let's do what we love to do on this channel the most and get into our playtests. Remember, the goal of the playtest on our channel is not to find Magical Christmas Land. It's not to show off our best plays, but it's to talk about what we're looking for in a hand and how we're going to set up our game plan. Here we're keeping a 2-lander with Rampant Growth and Arcane Signet. So we've got some ways to get some mana, and not only that, but we got some great creatures. We got Bristly Bill, a creature that whenever a land comes in, we can put a counter on a creature we control, and then for 5 mana, we can just double the number of counters on all of our creatures. That's a huge ability, especially if we start proliferating and getting counters across the board. Maester Seymour is interesting. At the beginning of combat of our turn, we can put a number of counters equal to its power on another creature we control. So we can really start spreading out counters to other creatures, especially probably one that doesn't have them yet, right? So we can proliferate with Tidus. And then Kuthel stops our opponents from casting spells on our turn, and then whenever one of our creatures with power greater than its base power hits a player in combat, we draw a card. So again, counters are an easy way to do that. So we've got Ramp, we've got some nice setup pieces to pass counters out, we've got some nice profits from that. I mean, our hand's looking pretty good. It's just about ramping up and getting our pieces down. I think the headquarters feels good turn 1, just to get the value in. Now here in turn 2, we've got a couple choices. We can get ramping, right? Unlock more next turn. If I do rampant growth this turn, we could do, Bristly Bill plus, Arcane Signet next turn. But I guess my question is, what makes the most sense? It makes the most sense to me to try to rampant growth once Bristly Bill's down to get access to its trigger. Right. I guess the only other problem in our hand is we have a tap land, and so that could be a potential downside. But again, Bristly Bill could still get the counter from it. So I think we play the Signet. Come to our turn. Okay, well, there's the land. My thought is Bristly Bill, play the land, get a counter on it, and then play the rampant growth. This is just going to allow us to go around at all of our colors, give Bill another counter, get it started going. And what I really like about this is now as we come into this turn, I can play Tidus. Play this tap land and put the counter on Tidus, because remember, it doesn't have to go on Bristly. Now I've got 2 mana left. I mean, nothing to do with it quite yet, but that's a-okay. Start a combat on a return. We don't need to move a counter. Bristly Bill can attack, and if it actually does hit a player this turn, we would draw a card and proliferate. Let's say that it does hit. So we draw a card and proliferate. Not too bad, because we're just getting more things in our hand. Here we have Nesting Grounds, a land that can move a counter from a permanent we control onto another permanent. It doesn't have to be our permanent, which is very interesting, but this provides us some interesting options. We'll put the counter on Tidus there. So now with 7 mana, I mean, I love the Battle Priest to give them lifelink. I also really like Kutzel. Contaminator could open up the poison counter scenarios. But Battle Priest seems really good. And then I like the idea of Seymour. I could get a counter on a Battle Priest, and then we could move a counter from like Bill or Tidus over to Seymour, just to make sure that when we proliferate, we do it. So here, my thought is start a combat. Seymour puts a counter on Battle Priest. Remove one from one of these guys to put it into Seymour. Because remember, Seymour hands counters out equal to its power. So the higher Seymour is, right, the more counters we're adding out. Now we attack with Bill and Tidus. They both have lifelink now, which is really nice. So at least we're getting something back. Let's say just one of them hits, right? Either way, whether one or two of them hit, we get to proliferate and draw a card. Now as we move over next turn, there's Dust Shell Crawler, which can give them all trample, which is pretty nice. I think my thought is Kutzel plus Dust Shell Crawler. Going into combat, Seymour can, I guess, give its counters to, or give the counters to Dust Shell Crawler. We could just take a counter off of one of our creatures and put it onto Kutzel, right? So Kutzel has counters that we could proliferate. Now everybody has trample and lifelink, and we could just continue attacking. If any of them hit a player, let's say they hit 2 players, we get to draw off of Kutzel. And I think we're just in great shape, continuing to spread our counters game plan. We got Flawless to back up our board. And then next turn, if we don't want to commit to the board anymore, we just pay 5 mana into Bristly Bill to double all the counters, right? That's an instant speed ability, so we don't even have to do it right away. We could go into combat, have Seymour pass out its counters, move the counter, and then do it, just getting all of our creatures to be a little bit bigger. And with Trample and Lifelink, right, we're just gaining a ton back, and we should be in a pretty good space, right, to have our life total pretty swell up in case somebody does wipe the board and send us back to 0. Here we're keeping a 3-lander with Chocobo Knights. That's that double striking enabler, the Wave Goodbye, Anduril, and Grateful Operation. So we have a way to pass counters out. We have a Blade of Proliferate. We have some benefits, right? We've got just 3 mana, which is a little awkward, but it's okay because most things in our hands are under 3 mana anyway. If we play Trommel first, Trommel actually allows all of our creatures to come in with a counter on them. I don't mind Grateful Apparition here, but I kind of also like the Anduril. The truth is, I guess if we put Tidus down next turn, we're not really attacking much anyway. The reason I kind of like the Anduril is because then we have the option to get it in the future. It is 3 to equip, right? So we're looking at maybe something like Zimone next turn. So I'm thinking maybe something like Tidus there. And then this turn, put in Zimone, start a combat, put a counter on each of them. Tidus can attack, and hopefully it can take its hit so we get to draw and proliferate. Then now coming to our turn, we've got 3, 4, 5 mana. We've got 8 permanents. We're almost there on Andoril. Getting there, but 5 mana, 3 of it to equip with Andoril. So we would ideally just need something that's 2 mana, which would be something like Grateful Apparition. That just doesn't get us the whole way to this Andoril, right, triggering. But 5 mana is still a good amount. Chocobo feels good here. I mean, both of these would have double strike, right? We could get something like Traumil plus Grateful Apparition, have the Apparition come in with a counter, and then, go into combat. Zimone could put one of its counters on Traumil with Tidus's ability, and then go like, 1/2, or go onto Zimone and then Grateful Apparition just with Zimone just to spread these creatures, or these counters around. I mean, it's pretty much guaranteed we're going to hit with one of them at this point, and go those on proliferate. Grapple Apparition couldn't attack, remember, so we can't get the proliferate off of it. But we drew really nice now into Tekethal, because now Tekethal can have this proliferate double and this proliferate double, just making sure we're really getting counters on our creatures. We're just at 6 mana though, so there's no way to play Tekethal and get the Andoril in. In the same vein, there's no way to do that. We could do something like Andoril plus Hadana's Climb and get it flipped over. It flips into a pretty useful land on the backside. Chocobo Knight to me just makes a ton of sense, but the only worry I have about that line is we don't have anything like Trample, so I just kind of worry that we're not sticking enough on the board, right, to really take advantage of it. So my thought is something like Hadana's Climb, put Andoril on Tidus, go to combat. I don't think we really need to move a counter. Zimone can put a couple on. Andoril goes off, putting two counters on each thing because we have the City's Blessing. Hadana's Climb going off. Put them on one of them and just flip over. Now we've still got the big attacks going. We'd get to proliferate twice with Tidus's ability and twice with the Apparition. Well, we're guaranteed to. Actually, I think about it. We're guaranteed to proliferate with both because Apparition's in the air. So as long as somebody doesn't have a flying blocker, we get in. And I think we're in great shape here. Again, I wish I had a little bit more protection, but truthfully, next turn, we could do something like Wave Goodbye. We've got the Damning Verdicts. We got lots of interesting ways to just continue to push our advantage there on the back end. But let's do one more. Looking at a 4-lander here, so we got lots of mana, and we got lots of things to do with it. Mikaeus to pass out counters, Falconer for the flying, Herald of Secret Streams for the unblock ability. So we don't mind this at all. We'll get the tap land in since there's nothing to do with it. Turn 2, I think I would just go after 3 visits here, Ram. Just go to get more in. It might end up changing what I do here on the next turn, but at least we get some more mana access here. So on turn 4, turn 3, sorry, I'd get Tidus down, leave a mana up for the offer we can't refuse, just in case someone tries to remove it. We really want to keep it around. I was going to say, turn 5, I love the Falconer, but the only problem we have right now is that I have no way to get counters on my creatures, right? So I'm almost thinking about just going Mikaeus for like 3, and at the start of our combat, moving a counter from Mikaeus over to Tidus and have Tidus attack. Again, the hope is he can hit so we can proliferate back up. But the point is now, right, Mikaeus can on future turns start tapping to give counters to all of our creatures. So now it's 6 mana. I like the Falconer and leaving up mana for Mutational again, or offer you can't refuse, or Ripples. We can leave up the mana now and really protect ourselves. Mikaeus can tap to put counters on the Falconer and Tidus. And then remember, Tidus can, if we want to remove a counter from it onto Mikaeus, right, to allow Mikaeus to have more counters on it. But otherwise, now that they all have flying, we're pretty much guaranteed to proliferate and draw a card as we continue to build our pressure. Now, again, we keep those pieces of protection up just in case. Now we don't need that unblockability as much, right? Because we have flying. So I think I'd put something like Kurtel down to to give us that protection and that card draw now. Get the counter from Micaeus, right? Now, both of these are in the air, so they're guaranteed to hit. Probably, if they attack different players, then we actually draw 2 off of Kutzel, 1 off of Tidus, and proliferate. We still have 3 mana left. We could get something like the Sphere Grid down. That would leave us pretty much only an offer you can't refuse as a protection option, but it does, at least lets us get there. And now, we can just continue to put more things in. We have the one-sided board wipes. We have the unblockability. We can just keep hitting, right, drawing cards with Kutzel, and I think we're just in great shape. But let me know, what do you think of Tidus down in the comment section below? Are you giving it a try? I'd love to know what you've found with Tidus and what cards you're liking to see, and I will catch you all in the next one.